Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great pleasure I welcome you to today's webinar on business continuity planning in a digital age, aligning ISO 22301 with cybersecurity and IT resilience. And I'm honored to be your host for this important discussion. And my name is Bukola Bamidele, and I work with Standards and Best Practice as the General Manager of Operations. Okay, so before we begin the webinar, I would like to give a very short background to why we are discussing this topic today. And it is important that we understand that in a rapidly evolving digital world today, organizations face an array of challenges when it comes to ensuring business continuity and protecting their critical assets. So the integration of ISO 22301 with cybersecurity and IT resilience practices has become very essential to navigate the challenges, these challenges effectively. So today we'll be diving into the complexities of business continuity planning in the digital age and how aligning ISO 22301 with cybersecurity and IT resilience can bolster your organization's ability to withstand and recover from potential disruptions. Also, we are going to be exploring the strategies, the best practice, and also, sharing real-world examples that will help us strengthen our business continuity plans and safeguard our IT systems. So our esteemed facilitator today is an expert that has extensive experience in the fields of business continuity, cybersecurity, in the fields of business continuity, cybersecurity, and IT resilience. And he's going to be sharing his insights, practical recommendations, and success stories to inspire and guide you in aligning with ISO 22301, aligning ISO 22301 with cybersecurity and IT resilience practices. So I will encourage our active participation. It's going to be very interactive and engaging. So I want to encourage active participation throughout the webinar. Feel free to ask questions, share your experience, and engage in the discussions that will be going on the webinar, because this interactive platform will allow us to learn from one another, exchange ideas, and collectively enhance our knowledge and skills. So without further ado, let me introduce the facilitator who is going to be taking us through the journey of understanding how we can align 22301 with cybersecurity and IT resilience. So our facilitator today is Mr. Olaoluwa Agbaje. He is a senior manager in the cyber and privacy function in KPMG Nigeria, with over 9 years experience in providing cybersecurity, privacy, and business resilience services to clients. He has led several projects for which profound technical skills are required, including cybersecurity governance, compliance and security transformation projects, IT vulnerability assessment and penetration testing, business continuity management systems review and implementation, and data protection and privacy assessment and implementation. His industry focus cuts across oil and gas, financial services, telecommunications, consumer / industrial market, as well as the public sector. In addition, he has delivered cybersecurity and data privacy training to various organizations and have also facilitated crisis management simulation exercises to strategic and tactical teams of several organizations. Mr. Olaoluwa has been involved in the publication of cybersecurity thought leadership materials and has functioned as a panelist at several cybersecurity events in Nigeria. With a virtual ovation, please help me welcome Mr. Olaoluwa Agbaje to this webinar. Please, you just welcome him on the platform, or you can clap your hands with your reaction to Zoom. Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so before I invite Mr. Olaoluwa to take the stage, I would like to engage our audience together. What are your expectations when you came across the webinar topic? What was your expectation and why did you join this webinar today? I'd like to give opportunity to 3 people to speak. You can raise your hand so we can unmute you to speak. Anyone, just to tell us what your expectations are, what are you looking out for in this webinar? Okay, Mr. Femi.
Hey, hi, this is Ashok Shaji. Am I audible?
Okay, Mr. Ashok, please. Yes, we can hear you. Please go on.
Yeah, thanks for giving an opportunity for joining this webinar. First of all, thank you, team. And currently, I am with Ernst & Young India. So I am I am a senior consultant in BCPDR field. So joining this webinar, the intent is to brush up myself and to understand the latest BCP practices across the globe. So that's the only intent, and to upskill myself in cybersec domains and IT information security domain. That's the reason. Thanks. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Ashok. Thank you for that. Okay, I see Femi raising his hands. Please, you can unmute yourself and speak.
What I'm here to basically understand is the equation between cybersecurity, IT security, and business continuity. Like I can see on the flyer, because most times when you work with organizations, you get a little bit of confliction within the CISO and the IT operations department about roles and responsibilities. So I would really want you to go, probably if you could shed more light on that, that would be brilliant.
Okay, thank you, Femi, thank you. Any other person, the last person before we, okay, Hosa, please, you can unmute your mic and speak.
Yes, thank you so much, Bukolan. My expectation in this session, this business continuity plan, is that most often we have a well-documented continuity plan put in place. But when it comes to implementation, monitoring to ensure that what you have put in place or what your focus was or your strategy is, most often it is not being followed to the latter. And there you now begin to have challenges. Then with IT, for example, under issues that in I don't know other parastatals anyway, but in most times it's got that IT, there's always a challenge within them, getting things done at when due. So I really want to have a broader knowledge on how to actually implement and to follow to latter the continuity of a business without deviating or trying to imitate others or doing copy and paste. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Hosa. Thank you. I'm sure our facilitator is getting all your expectations noted, and is going to be addressing it during this discussion on today's topic. Okay, right now we're going to hand over to Mr. Olaoluwa to take up the discussion for today. Mr. Olaoluwa, over to you, please. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Bukola, and good morning to all of us from the call. It's my pleasure to be with us this morning and, of course, share knowledge on this subject. I've listened to, the expectations, and clearly, definitely, quite a number of things that have been mentioned will be covered as we go along this morning. In a bit, I'll be sharing my screen, so just please confirm when you can see it.
Yes, please. Your screen is showing up.
Yeah, you're able to see.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the confirmation. Yeah, so like I said, it's good listening to, the feedback and the comments and, the expectations. the reality is that when it comes to business continuity planning, particularly when we look at the ISO 22301 standard, at the heart of it is ensuring that what we do is customized and is specific to each organization. So it can't really work if we pick someone's plan and we just try to implement without making it fit for purpose. And we'll look at some of those things as we go along this morning. So in the next few minutes, what we'll try to do is to give an overview of the digital age. What have we seen over the past few decades? Where are we today? We'll also be looking at business continuity and cyber threats. How do cyber threats affect business continuity? And look at a few instances where issues or incidents from a cybersecurity perspective have led to or impacted businesses significantly, where the continuity of the business is also impaired. And then lastly, we look at integrating the ISO 22301 standard with cybersecurity and IT resilience. Yeah, so without further ado, I think we can just dive right into it, understanding the digital age. And as we look at this slide, I would like us to reflect right on what the last 2 decades have been like. I think I'd like to just get a few reactions in the chat. Right, when you see these images, what comes to mind? What sort of memory do these images invoke? Right, we're looking at about 2 decades, ago. These are some of the things that I'm sure we would have been able to relate with, to a large extent. So as you look at this, what comes to mind? What sort of whether it is stress using digital platforms or the experiences. And I can start with the first one. When you look at the first image and you see trying to download a file. I remember when I was in this was secondary school, 2003, 2004, and then we had this dial-up system, right? Dial-up phone. And each time you want to download something from the internet or access the internet, browse the web, you would have to change the location, move the box from one location to the other, play with the antenna, look at the signal strength, is red, is amber, is green, and all that. And then you have to struggle with this sort of experience, just trying to download it. This is an 80 MB file, and look at the transfer rate, 4.4 kilobytes per second. In this time and age, if you were to download the file and you see this download speed, I'm sure you'll be wondering what exactly is happening with the network. And this was life back then, and this was how we managed, and we felt that that was the best we could get at the time. And when we look at those sort of experiences, we had to then leverage apps like the IDM Internet Download Manager. I'm sure a few of us on the call we'll be able to relate to that, where you have to sort of accelerate download speed, just managing the stress that comes with downloading files, MP3 files, and the likes. And then you look at the right side, you have mobile phones. I'm sure quite a number of us, as far back as 2005, 2006, having a Nokia phone was this sort of Nokia phones was the in thing then. It was so popular, the ringtone was so popular. The first few people who even had it probably felt that, that was so much, or that was the much that you could have when you come from an age or a society where before you can speak to someone, you have to physically go to their location, or perhaps send the letter, or maybe send an email then. But with the advent of mobile phones, the likes of these Nokia phones, GSM technology, all these were quite appreciated. And then think about this desktop system and the storage devices. I remember back then, cyber cafes were so they were the in thing. You get to a cyber cafe sometimes and you're so rowdy, a lot of people trying to access the internet, solve the web and all that. And this was what life was back then. I see Elsa's comment here, changes in tech world and more easy and flexibility to use. Yeah, so those are things that in the current age, as we'll see very shortly, there has been a lot of improvement. If you look at this image where you have a flash drive, a 256 MB flash drive. I'm sure if I gift anyone this today, you would wonder what exactly you want to use that to do. I mean, downloading a proper movie would definitely exceed this size. And back then this was the most that we could get, right? And where we could appreciate the fact that from using floppy drives, these floppy diskettes were able to store data with something larger. But in today's day and age, this definitely will not help in solving most of our problems. And so the world we have the world as we have it today, you see that there has been a lot of buzzwords. You hear things like big data, you hear things like cloud computing, machine learning, artificial intelligence, automation. All these have continued to gain traction. And as you think about it, two major things that have accelerated this. One is the internet as we have it today, digital technology to support high-speed internet connectivity. That's one key driver that has accelerated what we have today. Another one is mobile technology. You have as you can see on the screen, you have wearables, you have small devices, you have your mobile phones, you have your tablets, you have your we have laptops that are very small and very portable and powerful at the same time. In the world we have today, internet speed, we can see on the screen, you have internet speed as high as almost 1 gigabit per second. And we also have cloud technology, Azure, AWS, and the likes. What this means is that storage, when it comes to data storage, we have been able to crack the code, if I could use the word. There has been a lot of acceleration when it comes to being able to store data and access that data almost real time. And that's what technology has done for us. And so as you reflect on the previous slide and look at where we are today, you can only imagine what tomorrow would look like. As data becomes the new oil, as internet access becomes available to so many people across the globe, as businesses continue to rely on cloud computing. We have ChatGPT here, as AI, the use of AI in businesses and personal life becomes more ubiquitous and part of our everyday life. Can only think about the future and say, what sort of risks are we exposed to? Do we just continue to adopt these technologies without thinking of the supporting or attendant risks? And that's part of why we are here today. The next slide just helps to put some of these things in context as we look at where we are in the world today. This was January this year. We have a total population globally of about 8 billion people. So we have 8 billion people across the globe. Out of these 8 billion people, what is clear based on the statistics we have before us is almost 70% of the world's population has access to a mobile phone. So unique mobile phone users, we are seeing about 70% of the world's population. And when you take it further, the users on the internet, we have about 5 billion people. Just a little below 65% of the world's population has access to the internet. What this means is they are connected, they can access information, right? They have access to devices that can access information, and those same devices have they contain sensitive information in a few instances. They contain personal information in some other instances. And then we look at social media, right? 4.7 billion people, almost 60% of the world's population has access, and they are active social media users. And as we think about all this, the key drivers that we've spoken about just a moment ago continues to those drivers continue to push the boundaries, push the frontiers of what can happen and what the future can look like. But this is where we are today, where we have 5 billion people having access to the internet, and 4.7 billion people being active social media users. And I mean, a few years ago, this was of course not the case. And just to drive home the point, what we have before us is a snapshot of what happens within a minute, right? In 60 seconds, what we have about 3.67 million YouTube videos, being watched. You look at Snapchat, have about 2 million Snapchats sent. Google searches, about 5.9 million Google searches. So in 1 second, in 60 seconds, in 1 minute of the day, on the average, across the globe, we have, almost 6 million, people, 6 million searches, in a minute on Google. And as you look across the slide, you have all sorts of significant numbers in terms of what happens, how people are connected. Both businesses and individuals make up these numbers. So business processes, business operations, as well as we ourselves as individuals, we make up this volume of numbers. If you look at it, almost over 500,000 tweets sent in just a minute. So people are connected, people are engaging the internet, and so the exposure, continues to remain imminent. As you are connected, there's a clear line of interaction between you and the cyber attackers. One other thing to make clear as you look at the right side of the slide is that when it comes to what sort of apps are being used, what sort of websites are being visited, what sort of drivers from a platform interaction point of view, what sort of drivers are pushing these numbers, or we have chat and messaging. So social networks, people want to communicate, people want to interact, and you have so many of these platforms out today. And these are some of the things that have continued to drive the adoption and the growth of digitization globally. So having said that, I think it's important that we also consider what are some of the cyber threats that we're exposed to, and how do these affect business continuity. In a moment, we'll watch a video, and I want to get our reactions at the end of this video clip.
Baby, the world is ours. My heart is racing 100 miles an hour. Let's just embrace and turn the music louder. Let's get it high, get it right, dim the lights. Only got to sunrise. Start living for tonight. World is ours. My heart is racing 100 miles an hour. Let's just embrace and turn the music louder. Let's get it high, get it right, dim the lights. Only got to sunrise. Start living for tonight.
But where does the power behind the throne lie?
Tens of thousands of computers that have suffered from a ransomware
Another global ransomware attack.
Security company reported that it discovered one of the biggest bank robberies ever. No guns involved. Hackers did breaking into banks in 30 countries and making it off with a total of as much as $1 billion.
Bring the rain.
All right. So I'd like to get one or two comments from across the room. What are your thoughts as you watched the video? What was most striking to you? What really came to mind, as you watched that video clip? Anyone? Anyone? You want to type it in the chat? Feel free to unmute and speak, or you can also type it in the chat. Okay. Let me just look at the chat. Okay, because of our time, I'll just give a few thoughts on that, right? So as you watch the video, one thing was clear, right? When attacks happen, the reality is that, it's usually business as usual. I mean, nobody expects it. And so you just live life normally, you do your transactions normally, the same way you open your emails and, click, access links is the same way phishing email will come and you access, so everything just happens, normally, no alarm bells ringing that, oh, this is about to happen. So it really just happens, as part of, your everyday life, and you get to experience such. The other thing is, it's really not even just about the money. Now everything is being affected, from healthcare systems to aviation, right? Because everything is connected. When the attackers strike, the impact or the implication could get to the point where you would have people's lives being lost just because they can't access their records, or you have patients who are due for an emergency and you can't even access their records to see what sort of reactions they have, or what sort of specific medical conditions have been noted or detected, right? And so some of these are at life-threatening states, and so because of that, we've had these instances where ransomware attacks happened, and then people lost their lives just as an outcome, as a consequence of data being encrypted and not being accessible. Yeah, there I see. Yeah, so exactly. So within the digital age, a lot of things are really affected, and cyber attacks are, of course, on the increase. All right, so I think we'll just continue. And this slide sort of tries to bring perspective into that. As digitization advances, cyber threats, also advance. Just pay attention to the bottom. You see there that we have, timelines of certain events that have happened within the digital space. So, a few years ago, we had, the rise of Web 2.0, and that's where, the data, what is gaining popularity is really user-generated content, unlike in the past where, you had to, organizations or individuals had to, come up with their web blogs and put information out there for that to just view. Now, the content that we consume are what we ourselves have made available, user-generated content, and, that has also given a rise to the extent or the level of interconnectedness. And we also have mobile technology, the rise of the iPhone, the app, the mobile apps, Android devices and the likes. That's also something that in the last decade, we have seen, to gain quite, significant momentum. Currency, cryptocurrencies and blockchain, of course, this is also one of the major drivers for some of the cyber attacks that we see today. And when you think about it, the rise of ransomware attacks, largely leverages the existence of cryptocurrencies and digital wallets. The fact that there is a level of anonymization that exists within that ecosystem, and then attackers take advantage of that to encrypt data and then demand ransoms for the ransom to be paid to those digital wallets. We also have AI, we have remote work technologies that, have been accelerated due to the pandemic, right? So, owing to the pandemic, a lot of organizations have begun to, adopt, remote work models. And as all this, these are just a few of the developments within the digital space. But as all this continues to happen, what is clear is that the attackers are also on the increase. They continue to find loopholes. They continue to find ways and means by which vulnerabilities could be exploited across all of these, or how some of these things can be leveraged to further perpetrate the attack. And you see from year 2000 to even up until now, a lot of attacks from the usual botnets and trojans to phishing attacks that have given rise to a lot of ransomware attacks. The ransomware attacks have also metamorphosed to double extortion type attacks, where they both exfiltrate data and encrypt data as a way of enforcing that extortion that they had hitherto planned. And of course, now we have remote working risks. Most people work from home. Some work hybrid, using the hybrid models, and data is also still at risk. Those information systems, of course, are at risk, and the attackers are also on the prowl. So on this slide, what we're saying here is, who are these threat actors? We've been talking about attackers. We've been talking about, the bad guys, but who really are they? What is their motivation? What are they really after? And so on this slide, what we've tried to do is to highlight a few, threat actors. We have nation states, and these are, those who are backed by, more than sufficient resources. We have, nation states that, have partnerships with, organized syndicate groups, and these are motivated by a lot of geopolitical interests, just gain access to sensitive classified information of other nation states. And we have cyber criminals, and these are the ones that, they are largely profit driven. They have the right skills, and they try to, attack organizations just for profit purposes. And then we have the activist terror groups, these are the ones that, they have specific ideologies that they are trying to push. And, as a means of pushing that ideology, they then go about, attacking organizations, attacking institutions, and it's really just to get satisfaction of the push of their own ideologies over any other. Insider threats, this is something that most organizations are clearly faced with. This refers to the individuals themselves, working within organizations, and insider threat doesn't necessarily mean that all the users are malicious. But the point is whether advertently or inadvertently, they are able to create gaps, or create create vulnerabilities that will be exploited by other attackers, and in some cases they themselves, out of discontent or dissatisfaction or being disgruntled, take advantage of their position to create cyber risks of cyber attacks for organizations. So I've tried to talk about this briefly, but I think it would be good to also highlight, where do these vulnerabilities really come from? How are these, cyber attackers or threat actors, how are they able to take advantage of organizations? And so on this particular slide, what this tries to show is the different channels, different means by which attackers and threat actors are able to succeed or exploit gaps and eventually perpetrate their nefarious activities. One is insecure data transfer channels. Today we talk about using data, your mobile devices connected to the internet, you're accessing different platforms, your financial transactions, using your web applications and the likes. If the transfer channels are insecure, if you do not have adequate encryption, then data could easily be obtained in transit. There are tools that can very easily help to obtain or exfiltrate this data while it's in transit if it is not adequately encrypted in transit. We also have weak access controls system, both logical and physical access controls. When there are weaknesses, then definitely the threat actors can take advantage of that. The absence of monitoring is another one. The fact that we have systems in our organizations and that we have implemented controls, does not take away the need to have adequate monitoring, in place. So what monitoring helps you to do is to ensure that you have enabled the right set of logs, to then proactively identify, when certain activities are performed. And we have tools such as, your SIM tools to detect, unauthorized activities or malicious activities happening on the network or even on information systems. Core coding standards. Today we hear a lot of things around DevOps, the developments, environments, coding, coming up with all sorts of nice and fancy applications. But at the heart of it, if inadequate coding standards, are employed, or the developers don't even pay attention to implementing the right level of security controls within the codes, then they would also expose those codes to attacks. And we have quite a number of other vulnerabilities that exist. At the heart of it, at the end of the day, one major threat that the attacker can use to exploit all of this is the ransomware, and that's why we have it in bold. So with a ransomware attack, a lot of organizations can easily find themselves scrambling and trying to stay afloat. And that's why what we have on this slide, right? The impact of cyber threats on businesses. Just very recently, we have Indigo losing $50 million due to an attack that happened in February. So their financial year ended April this year, and so within that fiscal year, they were on track to finish very strong. But unfortunately, with the attack that they experienced in February this year, they lost about $50 million, and of course that affected their profits. We have another one also very recently, Granules. This is an entity within the health sector, involved in manufacture of things like paracetamol, and they also were affected by a ransomware attack, and they are at risk of a major loss of revenue and even profitability. We have Latitude as well, right? They have also it's also clear that due to the recent cyber attacks that they faced, they've lost shares. And when you think about these organizations, particularly those that are listed on stock exchanges, once there's an attack, there's the impact or the implication of that attack is usually far-reaching. Why? Because once your stakeholders, once your investors are aware that you have been hit, no one wants to go down. So they do not want to lose their funds. They begin to pull their funds, and then that could easily lead to a spiral, drop in terms of, the share price. And that's what, has happened for quite a number of organizations. And from a recent IBM, publication on data breach, it said that the average cost of a data breach, even in the US, is, almost $10 million. And then, globally, we're looking at, about $4.3 million. And when you think about the cost, it's not just the cost, of what is lost. When you put it all together, the cost, the reputational damage, the costs when you have to deal with litigations, the cost when you have to deal with, regulatory fines, and other class, actions that could be taken on organizations, and even mitigating, putting controls to mitigate a recurrence of such, attack. So it's quite expensive, and that's why it's important that organizations pay attention, to implementing the right level of controls. Here we also have it that, beyond the cyber attacks, organizations face a plethora of other risks, or other threats to business continuity. About 2 years ago, we had the OVH cloud incident where, fire engulfed this data center. So the fact that you hear that, there's a data center does not necessarily mean that, naturally, automatically, nothing can go wrong, right? So that you have big data centers does not mean that nothing can go wrong. What they also are doing is to put measures in place to ensure that when any of these attacks happen, be able to recover, within the shortest possible time. And so you can see, when the coronavirus, happened, it affected to, a lot of organizations. The supply chain was affected, and then of course profitability was also affected. When you think about even the coronavirus again, when people unfortunately lost their lives, for a number of organizations, their key staff, when a key staff, loses their lives, and there was no process, no mechanism in place to ensure that adequate backup was or someone who at least had adequate knowledge of certain workings of the business, then that was a major risk and a major it's led organizations to deal with a lot of business continuity challenges in the wake of that. So we'll be looking at the final section, how do we integrate ISO 22301 with cybersecurity and IT resilience. Just like we saw the previous slide, there are quite a lot of threats, that can impact the continuity of businesses. We looked at the OVH cloud where fire outbreak was, a major business continuity risk that they had to face. We've had instances of social unrest. The pandemic is a recent one. Natural disaster. Thankfully, on this part of the world, we not have to experience, natural disaster. But we have quite a lot of, places where natural disasters have continued to, threaten the continuity of the business operations as it were. We have a few others. We've talked about vendor failure, right? Where you are an organization that you have specific vendors that you depend on, as part of your, the entire value chain of production. And when those vendors are hit, whether it's by a cyber attack or certain policies, that might negatively adversely impact the ability to continue to support your own business operations, then definitely that has a significant impact on the business. Power failure is another one, and of course, loss of critical staff, just like we saw a while ago. So these are different, these are just examples of business continuity threats that organizations are faced with. And as we think about the ISO 22301 standard, which we'll be looking at in a very short while from now, what is also important is to begin to think about risks. One of us who spoke up earlier about expectations, said something about how do we ensure that we do not just copy paste, just pick a plan from another organization and then use it. And this is where it all starts. How are we able to identify the risks and the threats that we are faced as a business, and then how do we then define what sort of solutions or strategies or plans that can help to adequately mitigate that risk, or ensure that the business is able to recover in a timely manner should such occur. So we'll also be looking at the implications, just to further buttress the points on the previous slide. What are some of the consequences of cyber incidents? What are some of the things that organizations would have to deal with when they experience a disruption to their operations or to their businesses? One is reputational damage. And just like I mentioned earlier, when you think about organizations that are listed, for example, they have a lot of stakeholders. You think about the shareholders. You think about those who have bought stocks, and shares in the company. Once you hear that this organization has been hit, the first thing that comes to mind is the cost that comes with with that. That negative publicity, and the fact that the trust of the public, your customers, your shareholders, your partners, they begin to lose trust because if it has happened, most times they begin to even wonder whether you are providing all the information, or you are essentially just trying to sugarcoat the extent of damage that might have happened, and the implication to customers, or the implication to them as your partners. And so the reputational damage is a major impact or consequence. And you can really not quantify it. It's very difficult to quantify what the implication or the financial implication of that would be to organizations. Another one is regulatory sanctions. Quite a lot of organizations will find themselves reporting to one regulator or the other. Over here in Nigeria, of course, we know that the financial services sector is highly regulated. And so just imagine a bank or a fintech being involved or in a cyber incident, a data breach, right? And there are all sorts of other regulations that guide financial services institutions when they but even the occurrence of some of these attacks. And of course, when you have as such an organization, financing the expense run your business, as it were, due to absence of critical assets, the loss that comes with paying the ransom in a few instances to threat actors, the professional and legal fees that come with managing this situation, this incident, and of course the other sanctions that an organization might be exposed to. And lastly, well, not the least, is the productivity. When you can't times, generally then you lose the operation really disrupted, and of course then cascades into a number of other things that we have spoken about earlier. Why do we need management system? When we think about all the challenges that we have experienced, why exactly do we need management systems? Also, I see you have
question? I'm just looking I could see how the regulatory affect both reputation damage and financial loss. So I was thinking, is there anyone that could affect operational, for example? Is there a way can affect both reputational damage, regulatory and financial?
Yeah, definitely. So thanks for the question. So these are all connected, right? And it's because once you have, so just think about having, any organization having a significant cyber attack, right? One of the first things that would happen if it's a ransomware attack where you can't even access data that you need to, you need to work with. One continue as it's as usual, right? Operation will be impacted. And then when you think about that news getting to the media, the reputational impact on the organization, loss of trust. If such an organization is listed, you have shareholders coming after you, your partners, your other key stakeholders. It affects that. If some of those decide, class actions against you, then that speaks to some of the legal actions, right? The regulators will find you. That's also culminates in financial losses. So such an incident has you typically have all of these related to the impact of cyber and so by the time you dig deep into what exactly would have happened, it would touch on each of these other areas. I hope that clarifies.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Management system is supposed to help us achieve, and this will help us to just segue into management. At the heart of it is about trying to put in place, whether on a personal level or as an organization. One question that will come to mind is this all there is to it? Have I covered everything? Are there some aspects I haven't considered? Right, and that's because you need to have there has to be a source of reference. There has to be a framework to guide what you're doing to ensure that whatever is being implemented to achieve a particular target is robust and it is exhaustive, and that's where management system standards come in. So you have leading thought leaders, you have all sorts of stakeholders within it is globally, in private and public sectors to define frameworks and standards across different business areas. And so today we'll be looking at the 2301 standard. This is just an overview. So we have within the standard, we have a number of sections. We call from clause 4 to 10. These are clause requirements. Because of our time, of course, I won't be going into all of this in detail, right? But it's just for us to have an overview of what the standard really looks like. So from the context of the organization, which essentially is helping you to what's the management system to the organization itself. What are the needs, and expectation of your interested parties, your stakeholders, internal, external, right? And then how are you able to scope the risk management system to your own needs? And then it goes into leadership, which is speaking to top down, from the top, from the board management, their own commitments to ensure that the controls being implemented are adequately implemented, and they are committed to providing all the resources required, technical, human resources, financial resources, to ensure that the system is functional. Then get into planning, putting the right level of plans, identifying the opportunities and risks that could impact the business continuity management system, and of course support. We spoke about leadership's commitment earlier, and this is where some of those would find expression. What sort of resources do we need for the management system? What sort of competencies are required? How do we create awareness and communication across this management system, and of course, documented information. The operations is the core. That's the crux of the BCM. That's where the details really happen, right? So organization planning and control. We have business impact analysis and risk assessment. The BIA, this 8.3 is a key element within this entire framework. Why? Because you get it wrong or you can miss it, right? You identify the risks that the business is faced with. What sort of threats could affect our business? The business continues. What sort of threats could impact our business, and could affect or could lead to disruption, whether it is natural disasters, fire. We saw a few of them, a few slides ago. So it's being able to identify and then contextualize the impact to your business, the likelihood to your business. As you think about probability, you're also thinking about what sort of controls have we implemented to mitigate this risk? What sort of gaps exist, in these controls? What else do we need to do? And then come up with a treatment plan. And then, of course, the BIA in itself, the business impact analysis, what we try to do there is to identify the critical processes. What are the critical services, processes, products to our business that we want to be able to, recover within the shortest possible time if there's a disruption to the business. So the objective of 8.2 is to help to ensure that you are then able to define adequate strategies, business continuity strategies, and solutions that are required, that are for such a business, and then come up with the plans. What sort of business continuity plans, your crisis management plans, your emergency response your disaster recovery plans, all the different plans that will then provide guidelines on actions, the just watching in the event of a disruption to business. How do you act? How do you manage such? And those are the things that the plans will capture. And then, of course, exercise program. Why? Because beyond having plans in place, you need to be able to exercise the plan, right? And that is where you're able to build in the right level of knowledge, your awareness. And speaking to one of the expectations from the speakers, you could have plans, you could have all those things. If you are not able to exercise, the plans, if you're not able to test the plans, there's something we call crisis management, simulation exercises, where you come together as a tactical team. In this case, let's say you're trying to simulate for a cyber attack. You have the tactical team, the incident response team, the SOC analysts, they come together and you have a scenario that they have to be able to, immerse themselves in it and respond within a given timeline, right? Then you respond and react. And the expectation there is that their actions are in line with the developed playbooks, develop plans and run books. And you have something similar for the strategic team, senior management board, where they have to also be able to exercise, their knowledge, their understanding of the plans, that have been defined to manage, incidents. Performance evaluation and improvements, these are also very key. And that's because beyond implementing these things, you want to have a system that continues to monitor, improve, identify opportunities to enhance what you have developed and what you have put in place. In the absence of performance evaluation, you are unable to actually identify or detect that what you have even implemented is operating as expected, or that there are new threats that haven't been factored, or the business is exposed, or you don't have plans that are no longer fit for purpose and need to be revamped. And this is where you get to reassess, you get to confirm, you get to enforce compliance. And of course, we have the management review as part of that. Also quickly look at a few security objectives in our framework. So when we talk about security objectives, we have what we call the CIA triad, that ensuring that data is not accessed or information systems are not accessed by unauthorized individuals. Talk about integrity, which speaks to data not being altered, or being modified, by unauthorized individuals. And then you talk about availability, ensuring that data and information systems are available to those who require them, right? And these are the key objectives when we talk about information security. But we also have a few frameworks, and we've highlighted about two of these frameworks here. We have the NIST framework, this NIST cybersecurity framework, and there are 5 key domains: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So you'd see that largely between the respond and recover is where some business continuity type controls and requirements will be domiciled. We also have the ISO 27001, 27002 controls, and this is a recent version, came out last year, October. So you have these Annex A controls broken into these 4 categories: organizational controls, people controls, fiscal and technological controls. And across these, you have instances where the business continuity management requirements have been highlighted. And that's what we really have here, just aligning the ISO 22301 standard with relevant IT and cybersecurity frameworks. So if you look at this, you'd see that we have about 4 standards. 22301 is at the top, and we have a few clauses where which we have highlighted, right? I spoke earlier that the clauses within 8 are really where the crux of implementing the business continuity management system, where they are domiciled. So your strategies and solutions, your plans, procedures, and of course exercise programs, right? And you see frameworks and standards. There are elements within this that once you implement the ISO 22301, you are automatically ensuring that those relevant requirements around NIST. So you look at NIST, where you have information protection, processes and procedures, response planning, communications, recovery planning, and of course improvement. So as we implement ISO 22301, automatically there are elements of the NIST framework that you already complying with, are you already implementing. Similarly, for the ISO 27001 and 27002, you are already implementing certain requirements, by virtue of implementing the 22301. So what is clear is even within the cybersecurity and information security frameworks and standards, there are specific requirements that focus on availability, right? And as we talk about availability, that's the third objective when we look at the CIE triad. And as you implement this, you are already working in line with some of the other cybersecurity controls. And this would be my final slide, right? How do I integrate adequately the 22301 standard? One major thing, and I mentioned this, is just identifying those that waste with business. The content, it has to be specific. People else's, what sort of risks are we exposed to? What sort of processes are critical to our own business? When we identify the critical processes, when we identify the risks, then we can begin to build plans and build strategies and solutions that would help us to mitigate the risks. So when we perform this risk assessment, we would also identify the controls that we already have in place and identify those control gaps. In other words, what are the exposures that we need to deal with, right? And then, in dealing with those exposures, we are building the strategies, we are building the solutions, to help us to, address these continuity requirements. Then beyond building the plans is also to, test, and perform relevant exercises, working with different stakeholders. So it's not just an IT thing, it's not just a cybersecurity thing. It's with different stakeholders within the business need to be available to test and ensure that, in the event of a disruption, we're able to recover and work in line with defined plans. Because you'll be surprised that there are things that you have documented as your plans. At the point of testing, you then realize that, there's a need to, adequately tweak, modify, or update, those plans, because as you exercise, you are also unearthing or revealing or surfacing new issues that were probably not identified, previously. And the last point here has to do with continual improvement initiatives to help to identify and address, right, IT and information security issues. So as we continue to, as we pay attention to identifying new opportunities, new threats, new risks, new solutions, opportunities for improvement and efficiencies within the BCMS. This would help us to continue to improve and continue to enhance what we have as a business. Yeah, so thank you for listening. I'm happy to pause now and I can take further questions we may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Olaoluwa. That has been very information, very informative. Okay, please, it is time to ask our questions. And just as we're preparing our questions, I'd just like to do a recap, just to give us what we've been able to learn, from Mr. Olaoluwa's presentation. So we learned today that our world has moved from an analog world to a digital landscape because of the emergence of various sophisticated technologies. We also learned that we have cyber actors who are, are rendering, activities that are threatening our business today. And we need to be conscious, of them, who are they and what the activities are like. And some of the threats too to our business, like the ransomware you talked about, exposure of unencrypted, online platforms, and we also talk about the implications and cyber incidents on our business. It could cause operational disruption, financial loss, reputation damage, and legal and regulatory sanctions. So that's some of the things to be, knowledgeable about, so that we don't, have such occurrence in our business. And lastly, he spoke about the overview of ISO 22301, the essence of it, the requirements that we need to implement in our business, and aligning it with, various frameworks and standards that has to do with cybersecurity and information security. And he gave us example like NIST, CSF, ISO 2701, ISO 2732 and I think 27002 also. So I think we've learned a lot, and I know that the audience too have really learned. I just did a recap just to know that, okay, we've really understood what Mr. Olaluwa has been able to really address the topic that we're addressing today. So please, if you have questions, please, you can raise your hand and unmute yourself, please. We want you to ask questions. He's a very experienced person in this field, and I think it's an opportunity for us to really ask our questions, and he's happy to answer. Okay, if you have questions, unmute yourself or drop it in the chat box. If you have any question. Okay. So while we are waiting for our audience to ask their questions, I would like to ask Mr. Oluwa, because I have a question to ask. Okay, so how does, I know you've spoken about the relevance of across the various standards, it addresses explicitly risk-based thinking. So I would like to ask that, how does risk-based thinking help organizations prioritize their efforts in business continuity planning and resource allocation? How does risk-based thinking help organizations to prioritize their efforts in business continuity planning and resource allocation?
All right, thank you for the question. So, when we think about risks, business continuity, and you think the impacts analysis that we spoke about, at the end of it is because we, every business process is right? You would want to first identify what is critical to our business, right? When you perform the BIA, what it helps you to do is, what processes must you recover, must resume to the business. And when you're able to identify what is, most important on the risks that they're exposed to, then that way we're able to then commit the right level of resources to those priority items, to those key processes, because we are clear that if there's a disruption, this one has to come up as quickly as possible. I take, for example, you have, maybe you're within the environment, you have processes that rely heavily on data, and you know that if anything goes wrong, we must be able to access this data. Once you've identified that process or those processes, then what is important is to commit the right level of resources to those critical processes to ensure that the data, that the resources that they require, in the event of a disruption, those resources are made available, and the impact on the disruption is minimal. Risk assessment, you perform your BIA, you focus on to ensure that you then spend on processes that are not quite critical at the expense of what is critical to the business.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Olaluwa. Okay, you can ask the question. You can unmute yourself and please ask your question.
I was just curious, who has implemented the ISO 27000? I know I've experienced some issues or some cases whereby people say, you know what, we don't need to implement 22301 anymore, because we've implemented 27001, which also covers a little bit or an aspect of business continuity. So in that situation, how do you convince stakeholders to ensure that, or how do you push this to stakeholders to say, okay, you know what, we still have some added benefits that could be gotten from this particular standard, or integrating this standard? So I would love to get your expertise on that.
All right, thank you very much. So, so the reality is that you have organizations that will have put some measures in place when it comes to business continuity, when it comes to disaster recovery. So they've done some things, right? But the question is, have those things been done the way they ought to be done? So that you have plans. These are days where people can go online, certain platforms, download templates, plans that you could use, and you just, provide some information there. Say, okay, we have a disaster recovery plan, we have a business to 27,000, certification, so we are fine. But at the heart of it, if you have to do something, if you have to implement something that is sustainable, something that is fit for purpose, that is customized to your needs, is beyond just ticking the box from a compliance point of view. It's about doing it properly, and that 2301 standard would afford you being able to identify what is specific to your business, critical, what resource have that you need to be able to recover with shorter emergency management plans. All those are not within the the ISO standard, right? So if you want to, you have to do it properly. It has to be done in a way that is custom to business requirement. Say, okay, yes, we are compliant. Because when push comes to shove, and that means when such a business is faced with actual disruption, those documents might not even be fit. They might not much, because you haven't been able to do the right things. You have not even exercised the way you exercise those plans. You've not been able to put the measures that help ensure sustainability of the management system. So I mean, those were my comments on how to guide to convince relevant stakeholders that there's still a need to go ahead with the ISO 22301 standard.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I hope you are satisfied with the answer, Femi. Okay, I see you raising your hand. Please, you can unmute yourself and ask him.
All right, too much. My question goes like, he make reference to $1 million. So I was just thinking within me, is it that this organization did put into place any of the ISO? Yes. So what could they have missed that have made them to lost so much?
Okay, thank you for the question. The interesting thing about controls is that you can implement controls at a level. The design of controls, right? You talk about policies. You have the implementation of part, right, before you get in. So I mean, it's possible that they have physical security policies or physical access control policies that have mandated them to put a door at the entrance, right, and ensure that it is magnetic lock enabled. You need to use an access card, badge it on reader before you enter. So they have implemented something. When it comes to the operating effectiveness, imagine that access door is not on UPS, right? You have an access door, it's fine, but it's not on UPS. And all it takes for an attacker to do is to just wait and watch and see that, once there's power outage, that's maybe 1 minute or 30 seconds outage, the door is, unlocked, and then he enters. So the question comes, but they have an access door, they have this, they have that. But what really has happened is the operating effectiveness, that you have controls that are not operating effectively. It could also still lead to a data breach. So the existence of standards, the existence of these frameworks, they are beyond defining them or implementing them. The effectiveness of the institution that has been in the organization missed it, and that's because it requires it's not from compliance point of view to checking the box. It requires you being able to pay attention to the relevance. Sorry, can you hear me? Yes, the screen was not visible.
Okay, I think it's network. Mr. Lua, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. You were breaking at
Okay.
some points. You're breaking at some points.
Okay, so just to wrap up, I was saying that at the end of the day, the focus really is around implementing the right level of controls and also ensuring that they're operating effectively, not just to check the box and get it done once. It's about ensuring that on an ongoing basis we put the right level of monitoring and continuous improvement around these controls. So that was the point I was making.
Okay, thank you. Elsa, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it's okay. Thank you.
Okay, Bolaji, please, you can have the floor. Unmute yourself and speak.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Lalua. Thank you very much for the robust presentation. Right. My question is there is a contemporary, let's say, staff attrition, right? I know business continuity has come to help us to manage all these gaps and all of that. But yeah, staff attrition in our world right now, locally, is not given even the organization and the management heads up when it comes into play and all of that. How can business continuity help us when it comes to managing the operation of the organization, right? And to help to ensure that the operation is not affected in any way, there's no breakdown in any way and all of that. And how feasible is business continuity in managing all of these things as a whole? Is it effective thoroughly, like 100%, or it's a way of managing it? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Bolaji. So the reality is that, as events unfold, we talked about COVID earlier, businesses continue to face different business continuity risks. So the staff attrition, like you mentioned, is also a major one. Where applicable or where possible, the standard would require you to have relevant, process documents in place such that the ability to have, even when you bring in new people, the ability to for them to be able to operate, in line with laid down procedures, it's a lot easier, right? Because you have SOPs that have been properly documented, they are revised, they are up to date, right? It's not about having an SOP that was established 3-4 years ago and today is no longer relevant. But you have a process in place that ensures that your procedural documents are also regularly updated and anyone can easily run with them. Where also possible, the expectation is that organizations look at what is being done and start to leverage automation. Right, we talked about the acceleration of digital in the world today. Leveraging automation means looking at our business processes, looking at what people do, and identifying those opportunities, those processes that are quite reputable, and having solutions that can, we talk about RPAs today, having solutions that can help to automate or fast track or accelerate that process. We'll begin to bring them in. It might not, be so many processes that would fall under this category. But as organizations begin to look in that direction and open up their minds to mitigating those risks, right? Then they begin to implement some of these controls. So on your question on whether it is something that can help 100% or it can help partly, the truth is nothing is really foolproof, right? What it helps do is to mitigate both the impacts or either the impact or the likelihood of that risk occurring. And then, of course, looking at what is critical to your business processes. Where you have critical processes and critical, persons responsible for running those processes, then there's a key man risk. The expectation there is also to ensure that there are backup resources. Who has understood this key resource to ensure that in the event that this key resource is not available, we are then not, exposed, because that process is critical to our business. So you don't leave critical processes to just one, key resource. You need to create, some sort of redundancy or backups in place. So I hope I've been able to share some, thoughts on your question.
Yes, yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Lalua.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, any other question? Any other question from the audience? Okay, I have one last question from Nisa, and there's this notion that that when you hear ISO implementation or ISO standard, it's majorly for big organizations like the banking industry, the FMCG industry. So I'd like to ask, how can small business, that's the SMEs, how can SMEs, especially benefit from the ISO standards generally, but let's look at it in terms of the topic of today, that how can SMEs specifically benefit from aligning ISO 22301 with cybersecurity and IT resilience practices? Are there any tailored approaches for SMEs?
Well, thank you for the question. So the interesting thing about the ISO standards is it is customizable to any organization, any entity, right? Even on a personal level, there are things that we do, we probably don't pay attention to them, from maybe we don't do them consciously, but we think about them. All right. I mean, for example, for me, just before I joined this call, I knew that there was a risk that for any reason, the data on my device could run out. So that was a risk to me. And the control was, I don't want to be disconnected. I need to top up. So that is, the mindset, right? So as a business, regardless of the size, it's a risk that, you're also exposed to, whether it's a small business or a medium sized business, right? And so the requirements of the standard are applicable. Like I said earlier, it starts with identifying the risks that you're faced with, and then identifying the critical processes, to the continuity of your business, and then building strategies and solutions and plans that would help you to ensure that in the event of a disruption, you're able to recover and those critical processes within the shortest possible time. So, I mean, that's the idea. So it's applicable to small businesses as well.
Okay, thank you. So no matter the industry, no matter the size, ISO 22301, any other ISO standard is applicable and can be customized to fit your context of your organization. Thank you, Mr. Olaluwa. It's been a very robust engagement with you, session with you. We really appreciate your time. So we're going to be bringing this to a wrap. It's almost 12:30, and before we go today, we just want to thank everybody for coming. This webinar is hosted by Standards and Best Practice, and we are a certification body that is certified to 17024 to deliver and provide ISO standard certifications to individuals. We're based in Nigeria. I'm very proud to say that. So we're based in Nigeria, and our mission is to help individuals, professionals, and organizations to show commitment and capability by giving them validated education, assessments, and certifications against globally recognized standards and best practice. And we have various standards such as ISO 9001, ISO 22301, just like we discussed today. We have courses in line with 2900 privacy, 27001 information security, even cybersecurity, ISO 27032. And you can go on our website, www.smbp.net, to find out more about us. We don't certify organizations, we will certify individuals who will gain the competence to be able to help organizations implement this standard in their organizations. That's who we are. And for the purpose of this meeting, we are offering free ISO 22301 and ISO 27703 to that cybersecurity foundation. So if eventually you've never done or had any certifications in these two standards I just mentioned, because you are participants in this webinar, you are free. You have access to take our free ISO 22301, that's business continuity, and ISO 27332, cybersecurity foundation certifications. And that will be sent to you via your email. If you have any consultations, you can reach out to us, and if you'd like to speak to Mr. Olaluwa, you can also do that. He's an expert in this field. So if you have any more questions, you can reach us, and we can also answer your questions. So thank you everyone for coming. We appreciate your time, and we always have webinars every month, and you always hear from us in our next webinar. And we hope that you will attend and also keep learning. So on this note, we bring this webinar to a close. Once again, thank you, Mr. Ola. We appreciate your time with us. It's been a great session with you, and have a good day, everyone. Bye for now. Please, you can connect with us on our social media, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, to hear more from us. And you'll also be hearing from us via email also on any upcoming programs, promos, products, or webinars. Thank you. Bye.